Today I'm going to be sharing my February wrap-up where I review all the books that I read this month. I've been posting a little bit less recently. You may have noticed I've been posting about half of what I usually do, and that is because life has been really busy lately. February was a busy month. I just got a new job and I just started a new job, so my brain space is a little more preoccupied than lately, but I am still reading. I read 8 books in the month of February and I had a pretty good reading month. There were only 3 books that I would say that I didn't really enjoy, and then the rest I either liked or loved. So that's been nice to at least have some consistent reads in my life. I've also been watching a lot of movies lately. I've been trying to get through all of the Oscars Best Picture nominees because the list is just really interesting to me this year. I've never completed the full list of nominees before. I usually try to watch like the ones that seem interesting to me, but there were so many that I was interested in this year that I was like, why not just try to watch the full list? So I've been watching a lot of movies lately as well, and a lot of them are quite sad. Sad headspace, but good headspace, because I've had a lot of good things going on as well, and a lot of good reads. So as always, I'm gonna be going in order from my least favorite to my most favorite. Let's jump on it. My least favorite book of the month is one that I had sent to me. I had someone reach out, ask if I was interested in reading this. I was very interested in reading this, and unfortunately I give it a 1 star, and I hate when that happens, but I do try to be honest no matter what. No matter how the book comes into my life, I have to give it an honest rating, and that is A Woman Down by Colleen Hoover. This was my singular 1 star read of the month. And I don't hand out 1 stars very often, but this book did absolutely nothing for me. I was really disappointed in it because I have had some better experiences with Colleen Hoover's more like thriller, suspense stories that she writes. I enjoyed Verity and I enjoyed Layla. I think that it is still true that I've read everything that Colleen Hoover has ever written. I was reading Colleen Hoover when she was like writing indie, publishing her first couple of things, and I've read everything through to It Starts With Us, which I did DNF halfway through because that was, you know, she's been publishing over a long time span and my reading taste changed over that long time span, and when I picked that book up I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll still be interested in it, maybe I won't. Wasn't, but I was interested in this because it's, you know, a return to something a little bit darker, and I would call this a romantic suspense. I would not call it a thriller necessarily. The story follows this woman who is a writer, and some of these details are going to sound familiar if you've been following Colleen Hoover's life. She's a writer, and she had this book of hers that was adapted into a film, and the adaptation was not received well. There was some drama between the author and the producer and the audience. And so she has been, I guess not fully canceled, but you know, not in the best light in the public. And she just needs to get some time to focus, to work on writing her next book. And so she decides to spend some time in this cabin to buckle down and work on her novel. Very soon after she arrives, this strange incident happens. The cops end up coming out. This cop ends up coming out and talking to her, and he kind of inspires her. She's like, he's really hot. Maybe I could work this into my book. And she's writing a book where there's this love triangle between this married man and the wife and then another woman. And she starts talking about this with the cop. They start seeing each other more often, and she starts using him for research, and he's like consenting to this experience to be a part of her research for the novel. And all the synopsis really says is that the lines start to blur between the research and the real life. Like things start to take a little bit of a dark path. So you don't fully really know where the story is going to go. And it takes quite a bit of time to get set up and to start showing you where it's going. And the reason it got a 1 star from me is because I don't feel like it really went anywhere necessarily. At times it leans into dark romance tropes a little bit, which was an interesting choice. The thing it reminded me of the most is the movie Baby Girl, if you've seen that. I feel like that's the best comparison point that I have for this. As much as Colleen Hoover has said this is not a self-insert, it is hard to read this knowing what has all been going on with her and the adaptation of It Ends With Us and all the drama between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, and then like some of those themes kicking off where the author is at the start of the book and the things that she's thinking about and adaptations and Hollywood and perception and authorial spaces. Like it feels a little too close to home, and it's impossible to not be thinking about those things. As far as what goes on in the story otherwise, like I'm not saying I think that Colleen Hoover uses these research methods and like makes people method act with her in order to be able to write her books, but it is just interesting like all we know about Colleen Hoover publicly recently is all that scandal, and then that's like what this book is also kind of following as an author in a similar position. Maybe another point of comparison could be The Last Word by Taylor Adams. That is a story where this reader gives a 1-star review of a book and then they end up in this scary situation with someone coming after them. Kind of follows some similar ideas. However, The Last Word I loved and gave a 5-star and I think was a great and exciting book, and this just did not really do it for me. Mainly, I felt like the main character lacked a lot of dimension. You don't really know a lot about her other than this specific scenario that she's in. And again, it feels so similar to the authors that you're just kind of like self-inserting the author, I guess, a little bit while you're reading. And then there's this twist reveal that happens later in the book, and that hinges on the fact that there's been a lot withheld from you. And so I guess that's why you don't know a lot about the character, was like so that twist could happen later, but I would have rather just known those things about the character early rather than that being some kind of like little gotcha moment later in the book. So unfortunately, there wasn't really anything that I liked about this. By the end of the book, I feel like we didn't go anywhere. It kind of just lands in a place where it's like, oh, okay, so did we resolve anything? Did anything change? Did we go on any major character arcs? Not really, so disappointing one for sure. Next up is a book I gave a 2-star to, and that is a memoir that I listened to on audiobook, which is called Bottom of the Pyramid. This is by Nia from Dance Moms. I was a watcher of Dance Moms back in the day. I never fully watched the rest of the show once they moved to California, but I watched a lot of the early seasons. I was really familiar with them. I sort of keep up with some of the girls from that show a little bit. And this was actually my in-person book club book for the month last month, which is why I've decided to read it. I don't read a ton of memoirs often, and usually when I do, I don't put a rating on them. But this one, I don't know, I felt like I could put a more clear rating on it. I think sometimes with a memoir, you're like, oh, I don't know, the story was so interesting that I don't know if I liked the writing more or the story, and then am I like rating someone's life story? In this, I was definitely rating the writing, the craft, the storytelling, and the full way that the narrative comes together in the story. I feel like this book didn't tell me a ton that I didn't already know about Nia, just from casual viewership and casually keeping up and, you know, casually knowing the horrible things that these girls went through on Dance Moms. If you're unfamiliar, Dance Moms was a show on Lifetime. Followed a cast of girls and their moms at this dance academy run by Abby Lee Miller, and she was just really brutal with these girls. She has all these like memeable moments. She yelled at them a lot. And every week she would have a pyramid for the girls where their headshots would be put up on the wall, and she would rank them. She'd be like, at the bottom of the pyramid, Nia. At the top of the pyramid, Maddie. And it was like always the favorite girl at the top, and Nia always ended up on the bottom of the pyramid for the most time. Also, Nia was the only Black girl on the team, I think the whole time. I don't know, I didn't watch the later seasons, but what she explores in her story is talking about just the difficult circumstances she went through, going through this dance academy, and how the racial dynamics explain a lot of what happened for her too, the racism she experienced, microaggressions, feeling like she didn't fit in, and what it felt like to always be at the bottom of the pyramid. The story kind of jumps around a bit, and I think it still feels like she's maybe too close to the story. I feel like sometimes you want people to have space before they write a memoir, like more years to reflect on something, to feel a little bit differently. I think one of the interesting dynamics with stories like this that are about children who go through these experiences, being in the limelight, being on TV, being in Hollywood, is, you know, the parent responsibility in that relationship. And while she talks about that sometimes, and she does mention like, oh, I did want to kind of leave the studio at one point, but then we were like thinking about the contract, and you know, my mom would have supported me, whatever, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't feel like she's maybe fully unpacked that responsibility on her parents' end and like ways that maybe she wasn't protected fully. And it's just really like not examining that a ton, or not putting a lot of criticism on that. That's maybe why I felt like, well, maybe with some more time and space, maybe when you get a little bit older, you would realize like, wow, if I was this age and I had a kid, I could never let them go through something like that. There are also some things mentioned about like her siblings and how they didn't get as much attention, but it didn't feel like that fully got unpacked. The whole thing felt a little bit surface level, I guess. Felt like I didn't learn a lot that I didn't already know from just casually tuning in. It felt pretty surface level. I didn't think the writing quality was great. I remember one sentence that said like the cake was really yummy or something that just, you know, stuck out to me. She does read the audiobook herself. I always enjoy that when the author reads the audiobook, but I didn't love the narration a ton. Obviously, this was a really personal project to her. If it's something you're interested in picking up, I wouldn't dissuade you from it necessarily. I just didn't really have like a great experience with it. Next up is a book I had as an ARC called Murder Bimbo. And I'm actually gonna have to refer back to the synopsis to see how to explain this book to you. A 32-year-old sex worker has just killed extremist political hopeful Meatneck. Holed up in an off-the-grid cabin in the woods, she now has only 2 days, her wits, and a high-speed internet connection to save her own life. Her best bet is to reach out to the wildly popular feminist investigative podcast, Justice for Bimbos. In a hastily typed series of emails, the newly minted Murder Bimbo explains how she was recruited and then trained by a cabal of codenamed US agents to take out Meatneck. So that's kind of what I thought the story was going to be about, but let me keep reading the synopsis to you. But when she starts a new set of emails, this time addressed to her ex-girlfriend, we begin to realize that Murder Bimbo might not be the unsuspecting cog she claims to be. In a time where truth is more flexible than ever before, who really is Murder Bimbo and what will she do next? So that's what threw me off with this book. The story is told in 3 parts as this woman, the sex worker, tells her story to 3 different audiences. I didn't know that was going to be the framing. I started reading the first part of the story that follows the story of the sex worker being pulled into this group of, these secret US agents who are planning this assassination of this extremist political figure, which right now in America, interesting story to read about. Lots to unpack there. Lots of reasons that story was really interesting. And I loved it in the first 33%. I was like, this is gonna be a 5-star. This is really intriguing. What a fresh story in this time. Love it. And then I got to the second part of the story and I was like, oh, now we're telling the story again to a different audience. And then you get to the third part of the story and you do it again. And that just didn't really land for me because I think if I would have known that was going to happen, I would have maybe liked it better because then I would have been looking at it from that lens and this concept of like, what is the truth? And then I feel like I would have taken more away from the story maybe, but because I wasn't anticipating that, I read the beginning as truth and then I was like, wait, what is the truth? And it took me on this weird journey where by the end I was like kind of exhausted from reading the same thing over and over, and unfortunately it ended up landing as a 2-star experience for the whole thing put together. But again, I think I could have had a different framing and come away with a different experience for this book. It does say in the synopsis, I just like wasn't fully registering that that's what it was going to do when I was reading it that way. And so hopefully if you decide to pick it up, that will be helpful framing for you. But I definitely think it was an interesting concept. The author definitely one to watch with just, such an interesting, different type of story. It was very fresh. So I don't know, had kind of a weird experience with it. Definitely think it had potential. Definitely think the author has potential, but altogether it just didn't fully land for me. Now on to all the books that I did enjoy. The first one is It's Not Her by Mary Kubica. I listened to this on audiobook. I think I've read a couple books from Mary Kubica at this point. I think I always do them on audiobook, and they're generally just like interesting, pleasing domestic thrillers to me. I don't think I've given her a 4 or a 5-star, maybe a 4, but I definitely don't think I've had a 5-star experience with any of her books before. This one I ended up giving a 3. I thought it was a good time, definitely a good audiobook listen. It follows these 2 families who are on vacation together. It's like a sister and a brother, and then their respective families, their husband and wife, and their kids who are all going on vacation together. It starts when one of the families is found murdered and their teenage daughter is missing, and they had a couple other kids. And you're following from the perspective of that teenage daughter in the past leading up to this event, and the woman who is the sister of the dad in the present day as she's trying to figure out what happened and where the teen daughter went. Why were these people murdered? Did the teen daughter have something to do with it? And there's all kinds of suspects. There's so many suspects. Everyone seems guilty. I love a thriller like that that really can keep me guessing, where I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe this could have happened. Maybe this could have happened. Maybe this could have happened. And this person looks guilty and that person looks guilty, and it really could be anyone. So I had a good time with it. It was a really quick read. I liked the way that the POVs went back and forth between those 2 characters, created good tension, created good buildups. There were good reveals. There were good surprises. I didn't see the end fully coming, so that was always fun. It was just exactly what I want for a 3-star thriller. It was a good time. Nothing super unique or super memorable, but just, a standard domestic thriller. Didn't do anything wrong to me. Didn't do anything that really blew my socks off, but was a perfect thing. Just pop on an audiobook. And this is like a really positive experience with a thriller for me recently, because thrillers have just been tough the past couple of years. And to just find a thriller that I'm like, yeah, that's good, and I would recommend that to anyone. I think anyone can enjoy this story. That is a win for me. Next up is The Year of the Flood by Margaret Atwood, which I gave a 4-star rating to. This is technically the second book in the Mad Adam trilogy, which begins with Oryx and Crake, which I read several months ago now. Then there's The Year of the Flood, and then the third book is called Mad Adam. But although this is the second book in a series, it could be read entirely as a standalone because it's following a different set of characters in a different circumstance in the umbrella and the world building of the same kind of context of the first book, but it just follows like a completely different side of that story. These are dystopian environmental fiction stories that follow the before and current events of this big flood, this waterless flood that has happened in the world. In the first book, you learn what that is and why that happened and like who was involved in that. And I guess in the second book, you could learn that too, but you get like a closer look at the mechanics of what actually happened and like the science world of that in the first book. In this story, you get more of like the everyday person's experience going through this. It mostly follows this group of people called God's Gardeners, and it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of like a cult, but they don't seem dangerous. It's just a group of people who are really environmental forward. They garden all their own things, they live sustainably, and they have this like religious context to them as well. And for, 20, 25 years prior to this event, they are like forecasting that something like this is going to happen, and they're preparing for it, and that's why they're living in such a way, because the way the world is going leading up to this, it's like massive capitalism explosions, all these kind of crazy genetic modifications that are happening, and there's bad weather events, basically, like now, but exemplified. Like if all these things were getting really worse and you're like, okay, bad event's probably gonna happen, let's start preparing, let's start gardening, let's figure out how we can sustain ourselves when eventually all of this collapses. Follow two main characters in this story, Toby and Ren. At the start of the story, the waterless flood has happened and they are both surviving on their own in these different environments. Toby is in this med spa that she worked at, where she had been stockpiling some things just in case this happens, and she's surviving there. Ren has been locked into this biosafe room at the dancing club that she worked at. They have survived this event and now they're trying to make it through. They don't know what's out there. Ren is locked in this room, so she can't get out, and they're reflecting on things, they're moving through this experience, but the majority of the story is told going into flashbacks of how they got to this point, learning about their lives, learning about the God's Gardeners, learning about the world. And they're really just similar to the first book, which does a similar thing with this character named Snowman, who you're following him, at the end of the story, and then you go back and learn how he got there and all the science stuff, like more like of the behind the scenes, what was going on in the science world and these academies that led to this point. But this one is like you're following the real world people and what they were going through, what it was like to just live on the streets and how dangerous it was and whatnot. Margaret Atwood creates such a compelling world in these books. This is actually a book that I read many years ago. I read this in college in an environmental fiction course, and I'd only read this one. I hadn't read the rest of the series. So I've always wanted to go back and revisit the series. That's why I picked up Oryx and Crake a couple months ago. And that book I didn't love as much. I gave that book a 3-star. I found it to be a little bit dry and slow. And it just wasn't what I was expecting, because I didn't know it was going to like do the same kind of thing that this book did, but with a different character. I appreciate that book so much more now upon revisiting this book and like really feeling this rich world building that's been done and seeing the contrasting pieces of like why she looked at this part of the world and why she's looking at this part of the world, and then how they're connecting and how these characters are connecting. I will say there's a lot of like connection points between characters at different points in time through their journeys in this broad world, and it's like, wow, you're acting like the world's like 25 people large, because how are all these people running into each other again and again over the span of all this stuff that's going on over the 25 years? But for the sake of story, it's fine. I'll accept it. A lot of this book too, since it's following women, explores a lot of the harsh conditions for women living in these worlds, and a lot of like sexual abuse and harassment and just like horrible things, like a horrible world that they're living in. But I really enjoyed it. I loved revisiting it. I really enjoyed following the God's Gardeners group of people, while they have a leader called Adam One, who is this kind of like, religious culty figure. You get his preachings throughout the book a little bit, so you can see like how they're framing things and why they're choosing to live the way that they are. While that's a little, like not something I would want to be involved in. I do like the gardening aspect of it a lot, and just this connection to nature. I love books that are about the environment and connections to nature. I love Charlotte McConaughey's books. She's great at doing that. Margaret Atwood's great at doing that. Barbara Kingsolver is great at doing that. Reading a book like that just makes me want to be outside and do more. Like, this made me want to start a gardening box. There's a character in this book, Pilar, who keeps bees, and I freaking love her and Toby's connection to her and their story and the connection to the bees. And I was like, I want to keep bees. Like, this just makes me want to have bees in my backyard and appreciate nature and grow more of my own things. So I really enjoyed all of that about this book. I enjoyed revisiting it again. I definitely did not remember very many details about it because it's been, 10 or so years since I last read it. And the way it ends really makes me interested to see where the third book's going to go. I don't know if it's going to kind of revisit the same timelines and show a different perspective, or if it's going to converge these books and then go explore what's happening elsewhere after this. It's interesting that it's called Mad Adam because you know who Mad Adam is. There's a character named Mad Adam, so don't know what's going to go on there. And I'm very excited to read the third book. So I think I'll read the third book more soon than I did between reading the first two books. Either in March or April probably is when I will conclude the trilogy. And then I started a new trilogy this month as well, and I picked up The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a fantasy book that I've heard great things about over the years. I just haven't been a huge fantasy reader, but I always clock when I hear certain series getting a lot of acclaim or certain people talking about a series in a certain way. I'm like, when I'm in the mood for a fantasy book and when I'm in the mood for a series, that is going to be on my list. I picked this book up sometime last year. It's been on my shelves for a while. And this month I was in the mood to start it. I never really knew what the story was going to be about because the way people talk about it's pretty vague, and the synopsis on the back of the book is also pretty vague. It says, "This is the way the world ends for the last time. It starts with a great red rift across the heart of the world's sole continent, spewing ash that blots out the sun. It starts with death, with a murdered son and a missing daughter. It starts with betrayal and long dormant wounds rising up to fester. This is the stillness, a land familiar with catastrophe, where the power of the earth is wielded as a weapon and where there is no mercy." So I was like, no clue what I'm really getting into, but I trust what I've heard about this book, that I think I'll have a good time. And I definitely did have a good time, and I ended up giving this book a 4-star as well. The story is told from 3 different perspectives. You're following Essen, who is this woman who at the start of her story finds her son has been killed by her husband, the son's father, and her daughter is now missing. And she goes off on a quest through the story to try to find her husband and her stolen daughter. She knows why he would have killed the son, because in this world you can have this power called orogeny, which is like this connection to the earth where you're able to use the elements, move the elements, like calm tectonic plate movements or like forge stone and sort of stuff. It's like an earthly power, and orogeny is looked down upon in society. You learn a lot about that in the book and how that's viewed and how society deals with people who have orogeny, and that's all to be revealed in the story. So now I'm like, okay, I see why people don't tell you a lot, because you really just have to let the whole picture build itself as you read the story, and you learn from these different perspectives and these different pieces of the world how it all comes together. And it does a really good job giving you that world building slowly over time and making you see things and going along in the character's journey as they're presented the world, and then starting to question the world. And you go on that journey too, where you're like, oh, I'm being told this, so this must be what it is. And then you're like, wait, but is it? Or now I have this other piece, and now I'm seeing like how there's classism coming into play and how they're treating people differently, and like what might really be going on. Who might the good guys be? Who might the bad guys be? It does a really good job of that. Another character in the story is Demaya, and she is getting this mentor, this guardian, who is coming to take her away from her family home where she's been like secluded in this barn, and she is going to this academy to go learn some things. And then you follow Cyanite, who has been at this academy learning some things, and she gets this new guy coming in who you very quickly learn what the plan is with them, but they have to go on this mission together to go clean these coral reefs, and so they're going on a little bit of a quest themselves as well. I sort of saw where the story was going in terms of the POVs and like what you're expected to learn, but that was still a satisfying experience to see how it all comes together. And in general, I think it was just a really enjoyable book. Experience-wise, like a little bit slow, but it gets through faster than I thought it would. It's like nearly 500 pages, and I read it a lot quicker than I thought I was going to, especially with just how how busy I was. Every time I put it down, I was excited to pick it back up. The flipping through the perspectives keeps it really interesting because you want to keep revisiting where those characters are in their journey. Some perspectives I found more interesting than others. Essen and Cyanite's stories were most interesting to me. Demaya's a little bit less interesting to me at first, but you know, then you keep going, you're like, okay, I see what we're doing here. I also would say I can compare this experience to the first time I watched Lord of the Rings. I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan, but you know, I was watching Lord of the Rings and I was like, okay, we're gonna get to Mordor at the end of the first movie. And then the movie ended and I was like, why aren't we at Mordor yet? And my boyfriend was like, it's a trilogy, like buckle in. Had that similar experience with this book where I was like, oh, it'll end and like something like this will happen. And this, oh, okay, I think this is maybe like a wider spanning story that will take the trilogy to resolve. So I am going to continue the series. I had a good experience with it. I'm excited to continue on and see where the story goes. Next up is a 5-star read that I had this month, and that is Her Last Breath by Taylor Adams. And if you caught my video of this, I did do a reading vlog where I talked about this book in full detail, my experience with it. So I won't go into it too much in this video because there's a whole video you can go watch if you want to hear more. But this is now the 3rd book that I've read from Taylor Adams and the 3rd 5-star that I've given Taylor Adams. So his thrillers really work for me. This is a survival thriller story where you're following these 2 friends who are going caving together. Something bad happens and you're following the present day when someone has survived and hearing the story back and forth of what's going on in present day and what happened to get them in this situation. And it was so good. It was so intriguing and fast-paced and twisty and surprising and every single thing that I want in a thriller. It was perfection, 5-star. Absolutely loved it. Definitely recommend it. Definitely recommend any of Taylor Adams' books. I always have a good time with his stories. And like I said, it's been a tough time for thrillers the last 18 to 24 months. And so having a 3-star thriller and then this 5-star thriller was fantastic. I feel like thrillers are maybe so back. Like, I don't want to jinx it, but I feel like they might be back because my last book to talk about is another 5-star thriller. Would you believe it? And it came from Alice Feeney. It's my husband's wife. I did not think I was going to have an experience like this with an Alice Feeney book. She has been kind of hit or miss for me, but I feel like more misses. I've had 1-star books, 2-star books, 3-star books, 1 5-star before, and a 4-star. I have rated Alice Feeney's books every rating that you can give them. I've read everything that she's published so far, but I keep coming back because, I don't know, FOMO? But now I'm gonna keep coming back because her most recent book was a 5-star. That was so unexpected for me. I put it on thinking like, I might hate this. I listened to it on an audiobook. I was like, I'm gonna try it. If I'm not enjoying it, I'm gonna put it down. I don't want to like force myself through a book. It's gonna be a 1 or 2 star. I'm just gonna give it a try because I'm curious because it's a new Alice Feeney book. But the concept of this is that this woman comes home from her run and she goes to her house and then her husband's there with a new woman who's claiming to be her. And her husband's like, who are you? This is my wife. What are you talking about? You're not my wife. This is my wife. So very quickly on, you're like, okay, what has happened? Are they playing a trick on her? Has something happened? Is she losing her mind? What is the circumstances of this? And when that first started playing out, I was like, how can you carry this for a full novel? Like, how is this going to be the whole story? I feel like it's kind of obvious what generally might be going on between them. I don't know why, but like that doesn't seem like enough to carry the novel. And then boom, you get a surprise and then the book is off to the races. This was so fun. It's told through multiple perspectives at different points in time. You're like, why am I getting this story? What does this element have to do with it? There's this company that can predict your death dates. Like, how does that come into the story? Every single piece of the story that was coming together, I was like, what? I was getting more and more confused. And I love being confused in a thriller. I love having multiple POVs. I love not knowing what's going on. I love it feeling so complex. Like, how could this possibly be weaved together? It was surprising. It was thrilling. It was engaging. It was magnificent. And I was so pleased. So pleased. This is like a domestic thriller that does something different, you know? That's not just a straightforward narrative or just 2 little POVs where like, okay, yeah, how do we get to this event? It's like, how is this character even connected to what's going on? And there's so many reveals sprinkled throughout the story that just keep you hooked, where it'll end on a chapter and you'll be like, what? How, like, why is this person doing this now? That doesn't make sense. Or, you know, all these like dun 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 moments that just really keep you flying through the story. It was so, so good. I'm so pleased to have another 5-star from Alice Feeney. My other one's Rock, Paper, Scissors, but I definitely think this is my favorite Alice Feeney book. So I definitely recommend picking it up if it has been on your radar. So that is it for all the books that I read this month. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any and what you think, or let me know if I convinced you to pick any of them up. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!